Hello, everyone, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live show today. I am so pleased to have what is now I consider you to be a good friend, Daphne,
Mhm.
Daphne Jones. You're going to hear a little bit more about her in just a moment. Our conversation today is about this idea around what can managers do to ensure the well-being of their team members and well-being really in an expansive sense, particularly around really reaching your full potential for their team members. So if you would, please share with us where you're coming from. If you would share that in the chat so we get a sense of where everybody's coming from. And of course, as we always do, I really encourage you to put in your questions along the way. I know you're going to be really inspired when you hear Daphne's story. And Daphne, I just want to share with you again how inspired I have been in learning about your story. So I'm really excited about being able to share that with others.
Thank
So
you.
Daphne is a seasoned executive with more than 30 years of extensive experience with some top Fortune 50 corporations, including IBM, Johnson & Johnson, Hospira, which is now Pfizer, as well as GE. She was named to Savoy magazine's list of most influential Black corporate directors for 2021. She serves on the board of directors for AMN Healthcare, Barnes Group, as well as Masonite International Group. She is a sought after speaker and author and has a new book coming out this fall, When They Say You Won't. And you're going to get to hear more about this. So we've got people coming in from Bend, Oregon. I'm guessing that's my mom. My mom. And we've got Brady coming in from Carmel, Indiana. Christina coming in from Charlotte, North Carolina. We also have Kalisa coming in from Jacksonville, Florida. So again, as you come in, please write in the chat where you're coming from. And again, welcome to everyone. We've got somebody coming in from Los Angeles as well. Daphne, welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here today. So I want to dive right in. And would you, everybody's heard kind of the formal introduction, the bio introduction, but really what's most interesting behind this, behind your bio, your impressive bio, is the story behind it. So Daphne, could you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Laura. And hi, everybody. I love you. I'm glad you're here. And if I can do anything to inspire, empower, excite, or ignite you into driving even greater success, then I will have done my job. Yeah, you see the glory and you hear about it, but you don't know the story, right? So you want to know, like, what was the tea on my life? And so I'd say one thing about my life is I began with what I'll say limits and labels were thrust on me. So my mom and dad were immigrants from Jamaica. And my mom cleaned bedpans in the hospital as that was her job. And my dad worked the midnight shift on the factory floor. And they wanted me to focus on education so I could get my chance to grab the brass ring, if you will. So all throughout my early days, I would come home with the paper and I would have written something. I would have gotten an A on it. And my mom said, "Daphne, whose writing was that?" And I said, "Mom, it's my writing." And I said, "All the Black girls write like this." And she says, "Daphne, you're not Black, you're British." And from that point on, I've been confused my entire life because nobody ever called me British except my mother, right? They've called me other names, but British wasn't one of them. And she was always saying, go after excellence, and Jamaica was under the British rule. So that's why she called me British, because it was under that rule, Jamaica was. And so all my life, she focused on education, innovation, driving, learning, working really hard and all that. And then my high school counselor said, because I'm a British girl getting ready to go to college. And so my high school counselor said to me, "Daphne, going to college is not for Black girls like you. You won't get in if you try. If you do get in, you won't graduate. And if you do graduate, no one's going to give you a job. So I recommend that you go to get secretarial college and then you can become a secretary. Yeah, that's for you." And so I did that. I went to Women's Day magazine and I was a secretary. And I did that only for a couple of months. And I did a horrible job. a very lousy job at, and I knew this wasn't for me. I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a secretary. I want to have a secretary. And so that's sort of how the beginning of my realization that it's really what you say to yourself, how you define your own narrative, and not have somebody else define it for you, that winning sort of began. So ever since then, I've always been going after when somebody says something's impossible. I'm like, no, it's not impossible. It's just inevitable. So I went to college, got my degree in 3 years, probably always hearing in the back of my head, you know, I'm not going to graduate. I'm not going to graduate because I'm a secretary. And then I got my MBA in 1 year. And so after that, I went to IBM, and then I started my career, one job after another, one company after another. And I was able to move. And then I'd say when I got to maybe my mid-career or around then, I saw that now as a Black woman, you know, I was the only person in STEM, you know, the only Black person that you would show up going into a science and a technology panel or a conference. It just wasn't any of us or many of us. And so I didn't have any role models. I didn't know whose cookie crumbs to follow. So they say, if you can't see it, you have to be it. So I had to be that person so others could come after me and have a role model. Not getting resources, our budgets being cut, having to work twice as hard. And then I realized that I don't want to work twice as hard. I want to employ twice as smart strategies so that I can win when people say I won't. And so I just kept having the right mentors and sponsors and role models. And I started using the business strategies to be able to work my way up, not only waiting for my boss from the top down to pull me up. I also had to do things to push myself up. And so that I was able to be that person that I wanted to be and not wait for corporate America to do that. So that's basically my story. I'm married, my second marriage. My first marriage ended with a beautiful child, Jared, who is now 34 years old. And I realized that it's not just your family, your career that matters. It's also your family. It's also your fitness. It's your faith. It's your health. It's those things. And so I've learned as an older person that, you know, we just can't be this, you know, of public success with our career and end up being a private failure with our families and things like that. So I've had to do a lot of learning about what really matters to me as an individual, not just my career. So that's basically my story.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And, you know, kind of this last piece that you're talking about, how well-being was such an essential part for your personal growth. But one of the pieces that I would just love to ask you a little bit about, and again, I encourage people who are tuning in right now to please put in your questions, and Daphne would be happy to answer those. Mm-hmm. But just the power of those two strong voices. First of all, the voice of your mother, this voice of excellence, this voice that kind of reshaping your identity. You are British, and versus the voice that you received from that counselor. And how I wonder if those two were in conflict, and if as you moved up in your career, if some people kind of fell in the category of being that voice of your mother, and others fell into being the voice of that counselor, and how ultimately you were able to really carve out your own voice, but really inspired by the seeds that your mother provided for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's this intersectionality between the negativity and the positivity. And they say that whoever's in your circle may not really be in your corner. And so my counselor was in my circle of, you know, advisors, if you will, but he didn't really have my best interest, or maybe he did. He didn't know better, perhaps. I'll give him that, in mind. And so all through life, I have to strive to be the best, strive to not just fit in where I can get in, because that's where all the other Black people are. Mm-hmm. I have to strive not to do that, but I also have to strive to be authentic. I have to strive, you know, I serve on the board of three public companies. And when the George Floyd incident, which is, you know, everybody knows where they were when George Floyd, you know, got murdered. So I've had to use that to be able to talk and speak truth to power, speak truth to my CEOs, speak truth to my board members about what it is like to be Black. Because no matter how much money I have, I'm still Black, right? And so, but I also have to say, well, that's not going to be permission for me not to excel. It's not going to be, I'm not going to look for permission to prosper. So it does end up being that intersection where you always remember who you are, but you also want to strive for the absolute best that's possible.
And this idea of speaking truth to power, which in a lot of ways I see your book as a manifestation of that, where you have been able to speak truth to power in your own life. And now you are trying to bring this to a wider audience so that others can win when they say you won't. And again, your story is such a great example of that. So can you tell us a little bit about your book, maybe give us a little bit of a sneak peek in that. And in that, I know you talk a lot about kind of will set plus mindset, kind of how do we foster this growth mindset inside ourselves? What's the toolkit that we need? And then the skill set kind of to create this winning formula.
Sure, that's great. Yeah, the word win, it's all personal. Everybody knows what winning means to them. I can't define what winning is to you, but I have come to learn that winning is really realized at the very end of a journey, at the end of a process. When you get that promotion, when you get that, you win the NBA championship or whatever it happens to be, you realize it then, but it's conceived in the very, very beginning, right? When you first start out, and it begins with your mind. I always say that whoever has your mind has you. So if negativity has your mind, that's pretty much how you're going to behave. My counselor had my mind for a moment, and then he no longer existed in my head, and I had to make up my own mind and go back to what my mom was saying. And so your mindset, your will set says, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to persist. I'm going to make it. That's your will set. And then your mindset is either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And people will say there's more than those two, but I look at the growth mindset as saying, I haven't learned all I can. There's much more for me to learn. If I make a mistake, it's not a loss, it's a lesson. So how you think of things determines how you'll behave. And then the opposite is your fixed mindset. I don't, whatever I'm going to learn, there isn't much more. I'm not very good. I'm going to hide my mistakes. I'm not going to find any value in other people's perspectives. And so if you have the right growth mindset, my book then talks about the mindset. But my book is the tool set, because if you have the mind, you will get the tool that you'll use. And my book is the tool to help you be able to win in my 4 easy step process to be able to win. And then once you win, my book gives you the skill set that you can then have for the rest of your life. So you won't just be a one-hit winner or one-hit wonder. You won't just be success one time. You will be continually successful, because my edit process, which are the 4 steps, EDIT, it's a continual cycle. So you go from where you are, Laura, to where you want to be. And then you think of, okay, I made it. Now what next can I do? So you create a new version of yourself, just like your iPhone, iOS is that version 15 now. I'm at version 5.5 in my career. So everybody can become a new version. And my process of edit allows you to do that. And edit means change. And so you can change your trajectory, change how you eat. You can change your career. You can change your relationships and things like that. But it means taking the mantle on your own, taking it on under your own control.
One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Edison, who said, most miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like hard work. So that first piece is, this will set around persistence and willing to do the work. But then that mindset is really starts to set us up for not just working hard, but something that you spoke about earlier, which is working smarter. So we can be persistent, we can work really hard, but if we're not working smartly, if we don't have that kind of positive growth mindset, and then really thinking about how we can launch and iterate to continue to become our best selves.
You know what?
That's not going to go very far.
Yeah, what I think about when you just said that, I think about how we have spent all of our career helping our companies win in the marketplace. When a company loses a client or gets lower market share, they don't cry and they don't quit the market. They look at and assess what went wrong, and then they find another way to win. That's what I want us to do, is find another way to win. And my book gets into the business-like approaches We'll use Johari's window to look at your blind spots. We'll look at OKRs, which is our objectives, key results. We use the same kind of a tool that a business uses to win in their marketplace so that we can win in ours.
So it's not allowing the doubters to define who you are and where you're going to go. Instead, you get to decide that and then think strategically, just like a business does, a successful business does, around how you can advance yourself. So I just want to call out a couple of nice comments we've gotten. Mike Tanusis is joining us. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us, sharing great discussion. Brady Bear, love that and the tie to growth mindset, Daphne. So it's really great to be able to have those comments. And again, please feel to add in any questions as we go through this. So let's talk a little bit more, Daphne, about this critical role that managers play in the well-being of their team members, and the role that they can play in a positive way, but also I know you have a lot of experiences with them playing a negative role. And we're going to talk in just a moment about what we can do in response to that. But let's first dig in a little bit about just how is it that the manager has such a profound influence on whether or not we're able to achieve our potential?
Yeah, because I think it starts with truly the mindset, and the manager owns the team, owns the objectives that the team is going after, and owns the desire of being a great value add for the customer. And so when you are allowing somebody to have access to wellness, and I read that only over 100 million people do not have access within 10 or 15 minutes of a park. And so wellness a lot of times is just being able to go to the park and not have to drive for 2 hours, right? And so the people that are more privileged tend to have access to those things that make them well, whether it be gym memberships, golf courses, swimming pools, or what have you. So the manager but now you're in the office, if you will, or you're in the confines of the organization. And there's something about psychological safety that I think is really important. And so we worry now about gun safety in our schools and our business and whatnot, but then we come to work or get online or whatever, and we may not be psychologically safe because we may not have access to the same ability to take 5 weeks of vacation like somebody at a higher level does, or somebody who is a different color or a different gender than us. And so the things that make us better are the things that allow us to, I think, relax and be able to relate to other people and allow to be authentic. I think the manager, if they try to sub-optimize and tell me to go away or tell me to minimize who I am, Daphne, you're a little bit too bold. Daphne, you're a little bit too loud. Daphne, you're not nice enough, or whatever the case is, that prevents me from being my authentic self. So the manager has the ability to give consequences when you are not able to be your authentic self. The psychological safety is not there because everything I do may have a negative consequence, and the manager controls that. And it's the fixed mindset, growth mindset thing as well, I believe. And
I know you have a lot of specific examples, Daphne, of where you really came up against these managers effectively shaping your experience. And in one example, you spoke about how you were told that you dressed too nicely.
Yeah.
Or another example where you were separated out into a different space to isolate you. And these kinds of occurrences can have obviously a real impact. So tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us about what you did in response to those.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I was at a baseball game, and I was with the head of HR of this particular division. And I was a high level executive. And he said to me, Daphne, you really drive a nice car. Thank you. And my company had given me that car, as part of my compensation. So yeah. And then he said, you dress really nicely. He said, but we wear khakis and boat shoes here. I never saw a woman wear boat shoes in my life at this company. But anyway, he says, we wear khakis and boat shoes. And I think you dress a little bit too nice for the environment. I just don't know. Maybe I'm the only person that dresses nice, and maybe if this had been a white person or a white male, Would he have said that if the white male wore a tie? Maybe, so you always wonder, what am I being treated differently? But I said to him, I've been here 4 years. I've dressed the same way. And I said, why didn't you tell me this before? He said, I was afraid you were going to go black on me. I said, of course, like, what do you mean by that? And he said, I just thought it was not going to be good. And so
I'm assuming this was a white male.
It was a white male. Yeah, it was a white male. And I actually ended up going to the head of diversity, and I was going to retire from this company anyway, but I ended up talking to the head of diversity and just talk about how leaders address other people. And so there was no wellness in that conversation. I was not allowed to be my authentic self. I didn't wear, evening gowns and whatever to work. I dressed, I thought, very appropriately, the way I've dressed all my life. And so that can get into your psyche, that can get into your mind, it can get into your spirit. And then you start to doubt yourself. And when you doubt yourself, then you're free to innovate. You're not free to explore. You're not free to take risks in areas that might be helpful and beneficial for the company. So in sub-optimizing Daphne, he ends up sub-optimizing the company. If there is a chain of 10 of us on a chain, and there's 10 links on that chain, if he weakens one of those chains, right, which is weakening me in this example, potentially, then he could weaken the ability for the organization to do a really amazing job. And so what I did was I went back and I deployed an edit. I envisioned, like, what kind of feedback do I want to give him? I thought of my approach. And then I said to him, you know what, this kind of feedback would have been helpful, first of all, 4 years ago. And I think I could have challenged and talked about other examples and helped him potentially see as well, what does dressing look like? And if I wear a certain kind of clothes, will I perform better? If I wear jeans, will I be a better leader? What is it that makes leadership? So I went back to him and gave him feedback about how his approach was inappropriate.
This kind of sneaky strategic minimization, I think we might, that is an example of wellness privilege. Are you granted wellness privilege where you have greater access in becoming your best self? And I want to share here that Katie Breslow earlier shared. I have also been told this in my career, and told not to wear high heels. Brady is saying, thanks for sharing, Daphne. 2 questions. Let's start with the first one, which is, well-being is closely tied to this idea of regenerative leadership, which is leaving people better than you found them. How do you leave people better than you found them from a well-being perspective? Any advice for leaders? So let's start with that question first. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brady.
Yeah, thank you, Brady. I was told to read an article, and I think it was called "What Kind of Leader Are You?" But at the end of the day, it was about emotional intelligence. That is, to me, the answer to how do you leave people better? Because the first thing is, are you aware, of how you are behaving? Are you aware that you cut people off? Are you aware that you are giving snide comments? So, starting with the 360 or other ways to have that mirror, back at you so you can see how you're showing up. And then if you're aware, great, but are you able to control it? Well, I know I always cut you off, but I can't help myself. Well, that's not good. So you have to be able to be aware and to be able to control. And then you have to have empathy. And it's not just sympathy. It's putting yourself in their shoes and say, as an African American, as a woman, as a gay, lesbian, whatever it happens to be, I can only imagine what you may be going through, and I'm not going to do what I could do, or I don't want to do those things to make you feel uncomfortable. I want to do what I can do to help you be your best self, to be your most productive self, to be able to give us the greatest ideas possible. And so I think emotional intelligence, when you really follow that, helps you to be more mindful. I remember, and this is nothing to do with making somebody feel better, but I remember when I was I was at Hospira, I think, and I was a senior vice president, reported to the CEO and the chairman, and I was always talking. because I wanted, ever since my counselor messed me up and told me that I was just going to be a secretary in a pinstripe suit, just told me like, don't go to college, you're going to be terrible. I felt like I've always had to prove myself that I am really worthy of not being a secretary. So I'm always talking, right? And asking questions and making, raising an opinion. And one time this guy came to me and he says, Daphne, you got to exercise WAIT. And I said, wait, what does that mean? Why am I going to wait? He said, you should ask yourself the question, why am I talking? And that's what WAIT stands for. Wait. So having somebody that coaches you and you coach somebody, right, to let you know, help me know, pull me aside, tug my coat, tug my hair, if I'm not treating people the way I should. Having a mentor or a sponsor or somebody that helps you to show up and know how you are showing up. So that's my second point. EI is one, and having the right person to speak into your ear.
I think a lot of managers underestimate just how much they are positioned within the organization to either kind of encourage their team members to become their best selves or to do just the opposite. And I think a lot of managers think, EQ is not part of the job description for me. Well-being is not part of my job description. That's not my job. It's not my job to foster friendships within the team. It's not my job to try to help people to be their best selves, to help, ensure that they have the right mindset. And yet it is. EQ is, I think a lot about the Maya Angelou quote that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And right. And yet, just as you've described, despite these kinds of comments, you've been able to rise above it, and it's such a great inspiration for others.
And, so with the Great Reset or the Great Resignation, I think managers have to reset, and that's why this topic is really important, because people will care that the company cares. And that the company cares about what they care about, whether it's the environment or children or immigration or whatever. That is going to be the winning formula.
And one of the things that this ties to is Brady's question here around well-being and burnout and leadership development. So that's certainly a piece of that. But I also want to bring up Brandy's comment here. What is your response to company leaders who are all set in, this is the way we have always done this? Such a great question. And have no interest in starting with a small change to support well-being. She gives an example here of a manufacturing setting in which employees are not really given time for a break. So what are your thoughts around, what managers can do given the overall organizational constraints?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm on the board of Masonite, and we just went to one of our manufacturing facilities in North Carolina. And I was surprised to find out that the people on the shop floor, the managers at least, are getting EI training. They're getting emotional intelligence training. And you would think, real guys don't care about emotional intelligence. I thought that was an amazing thing. And I think the numbers will speak for themselves. The people that will leave the company, I would be surprised if people have not quit this company already for whatever number of reasons, not because of, not taking breaks, but you'll find that unless you're going to go where the employees are going in terms of their mindset and what they want, you will not have a company. And so either you wait around and you can share with them statistics about what employees look for in a manufacturing or whatever kind of industry you happen to be in. Give them the data, show them the data, and see if they're willing to listen. If not, and if you don't like where you are, there's a hiring frenzy going on. You don't feel like you have to stay where you are. Don't just feel like you're stuck in a rut in a company that you're in. You can always go to the one that has the culture and the respect of people that you like.
So no matter what's happening in your relationship with your boss, no matter what's happening with you in relation to the company that you're with or the organization that you're with, the kind of barriers that may or may not be in place in terms of where you live, you can always win when they say you won't. By again applying this approach, this edit approach that you have in your book. I cannot wait for your book to come out, and I know a lot of others are excited about that as well. I'm really excited about applying that in my own life. But can you share with us really quickly, Daphne, in 20 seconds or less. Top 3 takeaways for our listeners, and also leaving us with, how we can stay in touch with you. And it's really great to see that we've got so many positive comments that have come in.
Thank you guys for all your comments. Number 1, I'd say own your own narrative. Don't let somebody else set your vision for you. Own it yourself. But you got to be appropriate and politically correct into how you execute it, but own your own narrative, right? Number 2, it is said that we are a product of the environment. I would say let the environment be a product of you, right? Mm-hmm. Be that force that helps change the world or change your organization, change your family, change your son, in terms of being able to, because my son was not a very good high school student. I had to do what I had to do to encourage him to be better so he could go to college. And I would say winning doesn't happen only in the end. It happens in the beginning with your mindset. So how you think is how you're going to act, and how you act will give you the results. So if you want to change the results, you got to change how you think. Those are my takeaways.
That's where it starts with. So own your narrative and think less about you being a product of your environment, but rather how your environment can be a product of you. And that winning is a multi-stage process. And so really being patient with that process and knowing that the beginning is actually part of the end, but not measuring it just at the end. So how can we stay in touch with you, Daphne? And such a nice comment here from Brady, such a practical and powerful way to think about mindset and winning. Thank you for your story. And Daphne, I cannot thank you enough for being our guest today. Please tell us how people can stay in touch with you.
Sure. It's DaphneEJones.com.
Excellent. And we also have AJ put that in the chat here for people who are wanting to find that, to find your book. And what's the date that comes out again?
Yeah, the name of the book is When They Say You Owned, and it comes out November 8th by McGraw-Hill. It's available now on Amazon.
You can pre-order it. Please pre-order her book. Yes.
Thank you.
So I can't wait to read that. And next month, my special guest will be Jen Fisher, who is the Chief Wellness Officer of Deloitte. We'll be speaking on, yet again, the 4th Wednesday of the month, which is the 24th of August. I want to thank everyone so much for joining our conversation today. And Daphne, again, thank you so much. Everyone, take care and see you next month.